us to order. We're convened as of 11:15 a.m. I would respectfully ask everyone attending this meeting to mute yourself unless you're recognized to speak. Please note that committee meetings of the RTD Board of Directors will be held remotely via Zoom and will be audio and video recorded. The meetings recordings, along with the unofficial minutes of the meetings, will be posted as soon as practical on the board's website. During today's meeting, we're providing Communication Access Real-Time Translation, also known as CART. Anyone who'd like to access this service should send an email to the RTD Board Office at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com, and a link will be provided. Additionally, the CART transcript can be automatically translated into Spanish for anyone who'd like to access a live transcript of this meeting in Spanish. A live stream of this meeting is also available via RTD's YouTube page. I'd now like to call the roll for committee members. First Vice Chair O'Keefe is an excused absence. Second Vice Chair Whitmore.
Present.
Secretary Nicholson.
Present.
Treasurer Banker.
I'm here.
And I am Chair Bouquet. We have 4 out of our 5 members present. So we do have a quorum. I would also like to say, for the sake of the record, I do see Director Catlin has joined us, Director Larson has joined us, Director Chandler has joined us, and I believe that is it for non-committee members. So thank you all for joining us. Moving on to public comment, I'd now like to open this up to public comment to anyone who'd like to address the committee regarding any topic listed in the published meeting agenda for the current and immediately preceding month. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please either raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. During this time, the committee will not offer any direct comments or responses. However, if you'd like to be contacted regarding your public comment, please email the RTD Board Office at rtd.directors@rtd-denver.com. Staff will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. If you're dialed in, press *6 to toggle your mute settings. Please bear in mind that by participating in this process, you are being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, then your comments will need to be submitted via writing. Comments can be submitted to the board office at the following email address: rtd.directors@rtd-denver.com. Speakers should begin their remarks by stating their names, and each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. Mr. Kroll, do we have any speakers for today?
Chair Bouquet, this is Jack Kroll, Executive Manager of the Board Office. At this time, I see one individual present with their hand raised. That is Joe Beaver.
Joe, you're recognized. Joe, if you are speaking at this point, we cannot hear you.
There we go.
Thank you. We can hear you now.
All right. My name is Joe Beaver. Thank you for allowing me to submit the public comment. I'm a disabled polio survivor, and I'm here in support of renaming the Civic Center Station to the Wade Blank Civic Center Station. Wade Blank is a national hero to those of us with disabilities. He was hired as an assistant activities director at the Heritage Nursing Home in Denver that housed a large number of younger individuals with disabilities in the 1970s. He recognized that watching Hallmark movies and old people dying was not a way for folks to live. He also recognized that many of the folks there could live independently in their own homes with a small amount of assistance from a home health care provider. He was able to get some apartments renovated to accommodate people using wheelchairs and gathered some of the CNAs from the nursing home to provide a limited amount of home health care, such as showers, wheelchair transfers, things like that. He basically started a home health care industry. There is still one problem: transportation. In cooperation with RTD, he established Denver as the first major city to have a completely accessible public transportation system. He formed an organization known as ADAPT, Americans Disabled for Accessible Transportation, that spread across the nation and led to the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. Because of Wade Blank as a polio survivor, I can live a relatively normal life, living and participating in community activities rather than withering away in a nursing home. Because RTD worked with Wade Blank to start the disability rights movement, it's only appropriate that the Civic Center station be renamed in his honor. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Joe. Mr. Kroll, are there any further speakers?
At this time, I see no further speakers. I do see that Director Rusha has joined us. Oh, no, excuse me. Jamie Lewis is present and would like to provide some comments.
Excellent. For the sake of the record, before you're recognized, former Director Lewis, I do see that current Director Rusha has joined us and current Director Geisinger has also joined us, for the sake of the record. Former Director Lewis, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to compliment Joe Beaver for starting this process 2 years ago. The staff at the time did not have a naming process, so during the year of 2024, thanks to Director Rusha and unfortunately the passing of Marjorie, they put together the process in which we were able to start the process in January of this year. Staff put together and followed those step-by-step instructions that the Board of Directors gave them. So this is, in order to qualify to be in this position, you have to be a very, very high stature. And I just want to say, I'm not going to go through the whole thing because I think most of you have heard my presentation, but I've been to several ADA celebrations this month, and there was not one session where the name Wade Blank did not come up, nor the Gang of 19, nor the independent living model that Denver can so proudly emulate for the rest of the country. So again, want to thank Joe for starting this process, and if you have any questions, Joe and I are here to answer those questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Jamie. Mr. Kroll, are there any further speakers?
At this time, Chair Bouquet, there are no further individuals present with their hands raised. And in anticipation of your subsequent question, we received no written public comment directly related to any items on this committee meeting's agenda or the month preceding.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kroll. With no other participants in the queue, I will now close this public comment period at this time. All right, moving on, we're going to go into recommended actions. There are 3 recommended actions on today's agenda. The first action under consideration by the committee is the recommendation for the approval of the RTD ATU Collective Bargaining Agreement, or CBA. And this would authorize the general manager and CEO to execute a 3-year collective bargaining agreement with ATU Local 1001. And this would be effective January 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2027. Do we have a motion?
So moved, Whitmore.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. So I have second Vice Chair Whitmore as the mover and Treasurer Banker as the second. GM CEO Johnson and Charlene Pelleggi, our Chief People Officer, would you please present this item at this time?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Good morning, excuse me. Deborah Johnson, General Manager and Chief Executive Officer. In your packet, you have a report in which we're outlining the elements relative to a collective bargaining agreement with the Amalgamated Transit Union 10001. I am accompanied by our Chief People Officer, Charlene Pelleggi, who has auspices over labor relations and whose team, in addition to other members, sat and worked diligently with our labor partners to reach a successor agreement. At this juncture, I will hand over the virtual mic to Ms. Pelleggi to orient board members to the various tenets that are contained within the contractual bargaining agreement. So with that, Ms. Pelleggi, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, GM and CEO Johnson. As introduced, Charlene Pelleggi, Chief People Officer. I'm here before you today to present on the Board of Directors report with respect to a recommended action for approval of the RTD ATU Collective Bargaining Agreement. As noted in the board report on March 27th of 2025, negotiators for RTD and the Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1001 reached a tentative agreement on a successor collective bargaining agreement after roughly 8 months of negotiations. Following that time, between March 27, 2025 and June 9th, which is when we understand the union reached out to its members to commence voting, the parties worked collaboratively to take the agreed upon tentative agreements through negotiations to craft the final agreement that would go out to the members of ATU 1001. On June 27, 2025, ATU President informed GM and CEO Johnson that 97% of the bargaining union membership, had ratified that tentative agreement. This agreement between the parties demonstrates the agency's commitment to meet our strategic priorities of community value, customer excellence, employee ownership, and financial success. Notable changes are outlined in the board report. I will not restate them all here. However, I do want to highlight that the successor agreement is retroactive to January 1, 2025, and it includes wage progression reflective of 6.5% increase effective January 1 of this year, 4.5% January 1 of 2026, and an additional 4.5% wage increase effective January 1, 2027. There are additional changes with respect to the Health and Welfare Trust, as well as retirement. RTD has continued its commitment to ensuring the retirement plan for our represented employees is healthy. And so as a member of the trust, I can say that the trust was very pleased with the change of having a lump sum payment, because as you can imagine, with the market and the ability for movement, a large lump sum payment is highly beneficial. So that was another great win for all parties concerned. The tentative agreement also includes an overall restructuring and consolidation of the agreement, and this was designed to better organize the contents so as to enhance flow, increase ease of reference, and reduce redundancies. Key to that, as you will note in the board report, is creating an overall transportation section, as opposed to previously the agreement was bifurcated between bus operations and rail operations. These changes were designed to enhance readability, ability to reference and understand the CBA for members of ATU as well as RTD management alike. Lastly, I would conclude by saying that the financial impact of the negotiated changes are noted in the board report, and our finance team under the leadership of CFO Mackey have made the necessary fiscal considerations in future years to capture those increases in 2026 and 2027. At this time, I will yield the floor and take any questions the committee may have. And I would also advise that I do have Kent Enright, our Director of Employee and Labor Relations, who was at the negotiations table, also available for any additional information.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pelegi. I do see Treasurer Banker. You're recognized.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Since this contract goes all the way back to January, how will our employees then be reimbursed for those basically 6 months or more? Is it going to be lump sum? And then my only concern there, if it's lump sum, hopefully it's not going to throw them into a different federal income tax bracket because of all of a sudden the jump in income and has to be readjusted. So I'm assuming it's just it's going to be done next pay period.
So, sorry, thank you. Thank you, Director, for the question. So first off, I would say that yes, it is retroactive. So all retroactive payments are made in a lump sum. At the present time, during the period when the union was polling its membership for ratification, HR, IT, and payroll in particular have been doing the required work so that this could be implemented as quickly as possible once approved by all parties. And so with that, I can say tentatively that we are targeting the second pay period, full pay period after the ratification, assuming if it was to be approved by the board at the board meeting next week. And so that would mean that on the 26th of August would be that lump sum payment that would be made. That is in alignment with previous contracts, because it does take time to get all of the respective changes in place. And with respect to the lump sum pushing individuals into higher tax categories, it will still equal what they would have earned had the change happened on January 1, 2025. They would still have what that change in their income would be for that full year. So the lump sum is not going to change, moving them into another tax bracket unless that's where that change in income on an annual basis was going to go.
Thank you very much. I see a thumbs up from Treasurer Banker, so I'm going to move on to Secretary Nicholson.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say, I know this contract was a particularly significant amount of work on your part, and I really love the entire agency's part, and I feel like we got to a really good place, and was incredibly pleased that there were no disruptions in labor. There were no, other agencies had issues with their, and staff was able to get to a place where everybody could agree, and where we didn't run into that. And I really appreciated that. So thank you for your incredible work, your incredible hard work. I feel like this puts us on a firm financial footing for the years to come, while also recognizing the important role that our union brothers and sisters play in making our TD run. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Director Risha.
Sorry,
Oh,
Chair, may
yeah.
I just respond for a moment?
Absolutely.
I would be remiss, Director Nicholson, if I didn't actually acknowledge, I know you had said on my part, the truth is it's on members of the negotiating committee, put in excessive number of hours, as well as RTD management, members of ATU leadership. It was really a collaborative effort, of which I would suggest I had the least amount to do with. So I want to make sure that that acknowledgement is put where it is most deserved.
Thank you, Ms. Pulley. Director Risha, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to note that I'm on my computer that requires an external camera. Otherwise, I'd have my camera on. I've been really big about people having their cameras on when they are talking, so I apologize. I can't meet my own expectation for this one. But I have a couple of questions and a request related to the new CBA for whomever can answer it. First, thank you, Ms. Plaguey, for your presentation and this really informative memo, and to everyone on staff who worked on this. I do have a clarification question on the arbitration provision. Can someone clarify that provision that's referenced in Article 1 in the memo? So is that provision specific to the new section, it would be section 10 in the CBA, or are there any more situations where arbitration may arise and that is applicable? Just to clarify, I guess to rephrase it, I should just say, like, where does the new arbitration timeline apply?
The appropriate staff.
Pardon me, Chair Bouquet, if I could ask Director Enright to respond directly to that question, given that he was at the table and I would not want to misspeak.
Mr. Enright.
Yes, it's Kent Enright, Director of Employee and Labor Relations. It's very similar to the prior arbitration section that we had. We did have negotiations about improving the timelines for efficiency purposes. So that was the purpose, and the catalyst is to make that process more efficient. It does not change the standard grievance and arbitration process that we have had, really, other than the timelines. I will note, however, that we did add in additional language to allow the option for mediation as another dispute resolution tool. So we all believed at the table that would be beneficial for those cases that we can agree that's the appropriate path forward rather than arbitration. We now have that option formalized as well.
Thank you, Mr. Enright. Director Risha.
Thank you. Is it okay if I continue with a few more?
Absolutely.
All right. And can I have your permission to dialogue just for speed?
Yep, absolutely.
All right, thank you. And also thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification, sir. So I have a question about a vacation accrual, which is similar to what Treasurer Banker just asked, and it might have been addressed already. So I apologize because I might have missed it on CART, but is that also retroactive, the new vacation accruals?
May I, Chair? Yes, all terms and conditions within the successor CBA are all retroactive to January 1 of this year. So the vacation accrual will also be adjusted accordingly in relation to the contract.
Thank you. And then one more question and then a kind request. So section 7 of the CBA, I understood that was removed, and that I don't know what that section is titled now, but the current CBA, it's affirmative action and equal opportunity language. Would staff be able to just expand upon the rationale behind that decision, or whether those commitments are addressed elsewhere, either in policy practice or in this new CBA?
Staff, feel free to dialogue.
Again, I will defer to Director Enright because I think it's important that the context from the table be shared.
Yes, thank you. The whole section was removed. It was not added in a different place in the contract, but the parties through the dialogue at the table determined that those topics are covered appropriately by law and policy here at RTD, so it was unnecessary language. So it really part of our opportunity to streamline and make the contract more efficient overall. The decision was made by the table to remove that section.
Thank you, sir. That answers my question perfectly. And then I just have a question of staff. Again, I really appreciate this memo highlighting the major changes, and I was wondering if staff could also send a copy of the finalized CBA. I know it's ratified upon the board's approval, but could you send a copy to the board and also include it in the meeting packet? I mean, just given that it's a formal contract, also, expounds upon a lot of issues that, or touches on things that come through our committees. I just think it's an important and helpful document for directors to have in advance, or just to have, excuse me, in their repertoire of references. Thank you. And that concludes my comments and questions.
Thank you, Director Ruscia. Any further comments or questions for staff from members of the committee or other directors? Okay. Seeing none, thank you all for a great discussion. Thank you, staff, for this presentation. We will now move it to a vote. Are there any no votes on this item? Okay, seeing none, this item will pass 4 yes, 0 no, and 1 absent. Thank you all. All right, moving on to our second action item. This is going to be the recognition of the Reverend Wade Blank via honorary name for Civic Center Station. And this is for the Board of Directors to adopt an honorary name for the Civic Center Station to recognize the life and career of Reverend Wade Blank, and adopting the honorary name, change the name of Civic Center Station to the Wade Blank Civic Center Station. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
I have Banker as the mover. Do we have a second? And I have Whitmore as the second. All right, moving on. I will now hand over this presentation to Mr. Kroll.
Great, thank you all. Once again, Jack Kroll, Executive Manager of the Board Office, and I'm very excited to bring today to your attention a recommended action which would see the board not only commit to recognizing Reverend Wade Blank and his service to transit and to transit locally and his connection with Civic Center Station, but also take the subsequent step of adding an honorary name to Civic Center Station and changing the name to Wade Blank Civic Center Station. I am not joined today by Stephen Breyer. He had some pre-planned vacation, but I want to give a huge shout out to Stephen Breyer, who is the Senior Manager of Marketing He worked very closely with staff on some of the mock-ups that you'll see later in this presentation. And another great deal of thanks is owed to Jyotsna Vishwakarma and her team for coming up with some of the cost estimates and mock-ups for updating the signage. And with that, I'll just start with a quick recap of where this issue is at. We'll go over the overview of a proposal and then talk about the implementation timeline, share some design mock-ups, and of course end with a cost estimate. And then I'd be happy to take any questions as you all discuss the merits of this proposal. So as a reminder, the policy, the process is founded on the board's policy, which, as former Director Lewis highlighted to you all during public comment, was something you all established after receiving an initial request to change the name of Civic Center Station and taking the advice of the board office and staff. You know, it was pointed out you don't really have a process for updating the names of any of your stations in an honorific name, in an honorific manner, I should say. And so the board endeavored to approve a policy, and you all did that in July of 2024. Subsequently, community members, including Joe Beaver, who you heard from earlier today, submitted a form via the board's webpage to indicate their interest in updating the Civic Center Station name. And they subsequently submitted a completed application proposal, which contained a biography or historical reference to the proposed honoree, letters of support from the community, and of course, a proclamation in support from the Denver City Council, which was approved earlier this year. So again, your criteria for considering someone for an honor is that they must have documented contributions that are significant to transit nationally, documented significant contributions to transit locally, and or direct connection with a significant event occurring within the vicinity of the project subject or the property subject to potential honorary name. Other criteria, you all have an existing corporate sponsorship policy for stations, so it cannot conflict with any corporate sponsorships that may exist for a station. It must, the individual being put forward must align with RTD's values. And it cannot be a former RTD director, and the individual proposed must be deceased for a minimum of 10 years. A quick reminder of the timeline here. I'm not going to go through each one of these steps, but I will indicate again that Denver City Council passed unanimously 13-0 a proclamation supporting an updated name for Civic Center Station, and that is Wade Blank Civic Center Station. I just want to point out here, this was something that Director Rusha really pushed for and worked with us in the development of this policy. You know, Director Rusha had a lot of concerns that the cost of a name change would be put onto community members to make a change, thus being very prohibitive to the advancing of any name change proposal from certain segments of the community. And so the compromise that was reached between that notion and you know, some forces that wanted to ensure that we weren't opening the floodgates to name changes was that the city and county in which these stations reside would have a strong role in the name change process. And by way of that city council resolution, you know, it's clear that the community here is in support of this updated name. And so I just wanted to stop there and remind everyone of a key component of this. And then moving forward, you all last looked at this in June of this year, at which point you provided some consensus support as a committee for staff to put together timelines, mock-ups of the proposed signage, and then a cost estimate as well. And we're bringing those back before you today. If you all approve this action item at the committee level, it will subsequently go to the board meeting next week, where it will be subject to a 2/3 vote of approval to be approved and implemented. So again, Reverend Wade Blank was a prominent civil rights activist, very active in the disability rights community. He founded Atlantis Community Incorporated, which, as Mr. Beaver spoke to earlier, was a advocacy organization that supported individuals with disabilities, and it's actually still in existence today. They have a property near, actually in between the Alameda and Broadway stations, where they serve a number of individuals with disabilities and help them live independently. And the picture here you see is of Wade Blank and his son, Lincoln. A little bit more about Wade Blank. I'll point out the last bullet item here. He has a strong connection to the property or station under consideration, having helped to organize the Gang of 19 protest on July 5th and 6th in 1978. That protest is widely seen as a catalyst for many similar protests that occurred nationwide and brought in a peaceful civil disobedience manner attention to the challenges that many people with disabilities faced and continue to face living lives in our modern society. Those protests are also widely seen as contributing significantly to the passing of the Americans with Disability Act in 1990. Again, an overview of the submitted proposal. You heard from Joe Beaver earlier. Another community member, Mark Simon, also submitted a similar proposal. All of these documents are included in the packet. Many letters of support were submitted from a number of different organizations. And of course, a reminder, Denver City Council unanimously supported this proposed change at their meeting at the end of April. So moving on, if you all were to approve this item, here's how implementation would likely go. The name will be changed throughout the system as feasible pending available budget to begin with the January 2026 service change. So this is affording staff some time to get ready, make the necessary preparations, and roll it all out. There will be a media/public event held in early 2026 to unveil the updated physical signage at the station. One possible date for that event, although no specific timeline or date has been set, I should say, is February 4th, which would coincide with Transit Equity Day. This is a mock-up. Director Nicholson, prior to or at your previous meeting in June, had asked for some examples of what the signage might look like. And so staff prepared these signs here, and you can see the addition of Wade Blank over the existing Civic Center station marquee here. You can see there's a sign within the bus terminal that's very prominent, and this would be added here. The aim would be to also have these signs illuminated as the current marquee is also illuminated, so that these would appear visible to people traveling to the station during hours of darkness. Here are some examples of how this will be rolled out across our digital assets, and I apologize for the image quality here being a little grainy, but I think you'll get the gist here. So this is what it would look like on a web page being accessed via desktop. Here is additional mock-ups for individuals who might be accessing this information using a mobile device. Here is a mock-up here, and you can't quite see this, but in the bottom right-hand corner there, it does say Wade Blank Civic Center Station on the NextRide app. And again, another NextRide example. A couple of examples of what maps might appear with this name change, So here's one with the free, or 16th Street free ride, excuse me. And here's one with the free Metro ride. With that, estimated costs are to be set at $98,000. Predominantly, that's coming from the updated marquee signage at Civic Center Station. There will need to be a fairly thorough design process and installation process for those. And one note that is in your board packet that I want to point out here, the funds for this would be provided, if approved by the board, from the GM and CEO's contingency fund. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions and engage in any discussion on this that the board may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kroll. Before I open up the questions, I just wanted to say I was part of a committee meeting a couple months ago, and getting to hear just all, the stories of Reverend Wade Blank and, his legacy. It was incredible to hear, and I can't thank you all enough for the amount of work that you guys have put into it. Want to thank Director Rusha and then Director Sloan for all their work for being the catalyst and kind of lighting this fire for where we're at now. So thank you all who've been involved, and I know it hasn't been easy work, but greatly appreciate it. Secretary Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair Bouquet. I think it's a wonderful presentation. I've learned a lot about Wade Blank from members of the disability community over the last year during my run for the board and service on the board. And I think this name change is a welcome step in the right direction. I think community will be very excited by it. I do think that we still have a concern around wayfinding when it comes to this. And what flagged it for me was the rather long version of the name that appears on, I forget which slide it was, from the map in there, showing from Union Station to Civic Center. I worry about the many different situations where we list the names of stations in which we have to fit them into a smaller amount of space, in which we have to fit them into, a smaller number of characters. And so I want to give a little bit of flexibility to staff that in places where Wade Blank Civic Center Station might be a bit too much of a mouthful or too many characters for a small screen or a small space, that we are still allowed to label it as Civic Center Station in those occurrences. And so I have an amendment to the recommended action that I've submitted over to Director Kroll, though I would love to give staff, GMCO Johnson, anybody else who wanted to comment on the need for this, an opportunity to do that. But I guess my question is, what do we do in places where Wade Blank Civic Center Station doesn't fit? And I'd love to have GMCO Johnson's comments on how we're planning to address that in the situations on someone's smartphone or something where 5 lines of text might be a little bit too much to make it easily readable.
Perfect. So I'm going to actually give this over to Executive Manager Kroll, not Director Kroll, but Executive Manager Jack Kroll.
I'd be happy to defer to GM and CEO Johnson since the question was directed her way, and then I have just one additional piece of information if she does not cover it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cole. I appreciate that. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Secretary Nicholson, for the question. So when we embarked upon this policy development aspect, we did our due diligence. When I first came to the agency, recognizing the people that are utilizing the transit system generally use geographic markers specifically. And as you look at a transit map and things of the like, you traditionally have notifiable identifiers, so people are able to navigate. That was taken into consideration when we went forward and work in collaboration with community as well as internal stakeholders and board members to develop said policy. So quite naturally, for all intents and purposes, it states in the policy just what this is. It's an honorary name change, and keeping in mind that Civic Center Station will be Civic Center Station. We are limited in reference to characters that we could leverage on head signs and things of the like, and all of that was taken in consideration, was put forward before the board at the time acted upon the adoption of said policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Secretary Nicholson.
So just to clarify, for things like under what's being proposed right here, for things like head signs and other indicators where space is a significant constraint, the agency's policy will be just to use Civic Center Station when that is necessary.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes. So basically, what we're doing relative to honorary names, it is secondary to the primary aspect of the property. So considering on a head sign, we wouldn't have enough space to put, Wade Blank Civic Center Station. In certain aspects, we would put Civic Center if we are limited to characters. As relates to printed materials and things of the like, where applicable, we would put the honorary name in addition to the primary name being Civic Center for the aspect of navigation.
Secretary.
That is very helpful, and I will withdraw my amendment.
Thank you.
Perfect. Mr. Kroll, anything you wanted to add?
I had nothing further to add as GM and CEO Johnson hit on the one element there of the head signs. That was something that was discussed, and obviously there's not enough characters in those head signs to fit it. And that was a great example of where the agency will be flexible in deploying this.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from directors? Director Usha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Kroll, for your participation in this process and for the presentation this afternoon. I just wanted to call attention to packet pages 38 and 39, which contain the rubric overview. So for folks who weren't aware, directors and staff collaborated to develop this rubric with the goal of ensuring fairness, consistency, and transparency. So for all of us who have been a student or a teacher, you know that rubrics help set clear expectations. But they also require the evaluator to be reflective and intentional in how they assess each area. And so with that in mind, I just wanted to highlight that for this application, the cumulative scores across every rubric category came in under the rating of exceeding expectations. So all members of the review committee rated 23, there were 24 questions, but 23 out of 24 as exceeding expectations, with just one question in one category by one reviewer was rated as meeting expectations. And so to me, I think that's a solid A+, and it speaks volumes about the strength and quality of this application. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my comment.
Thank you for your comments, Director Isha. Any further comments or questions from directors? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to take it to a vote. Are there any no votes on this item? Okay, seeing none, this item will pass 4 yes, 0 no, and 1 absent. Excellent. Thank you all. All right, moving on to our third and final action under consideration. That is the ratification of appointment of Director O'Keefe to the Operations, Safety, and Security Committee. Then this would be for the Board of Directors to ratify Director Patrick O'Keefe's appointment to the Operations, Safety, and Security Committee. Do we have a motion?
Moved.
I have Nicholson as the mover. Do we have a second?
Second.
And Banker as the second. Is there any discussion on this? Yes, Secretary.
So yes, as one of, I guess, 2 members of the OSS committee that are also on executive, I just wanted to say that I think that Director O'Keefe is a phenomenal person, and I never thought we would get him joining us on the committee. And I am very happy to welcome him as a colleague, if only for a few months potentially. So I think he'll do a fantastic job.
Thank you, Secretary. Any further comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to take it to a vote. Are there any no votes on this item? Okay, seeing none, this will pass 4 yes, 0 no, and 1 absent. Thank you all. All right, moving on to our next item. This is going to be the July board meeting agenda review. So based on the vote outcome for the 3 action items the committee just voted on, the board office will adjust the board agenda as necessary. Moving on, I'd like to ask now for a motion to approve the agenda for the regular board meeting agenda for a meeting on Tuesday, July 29th, with 3 changes. Because of the significant public interest anticipated on 2 items, I'd like to move those items forward on the agenda to come immediately after external entity reports and before committee reports. Those 2 items are the Access on Demand program modifications and the collective bargaining agreement with ATU 1001. The third change is to move the Access on Demand contract extensions currently listed as item I on the agenda from unanimous consent to recommended actions. This change is being requested as the item was not actually approved unanimously at the committee level, and the board office accidentally placed the item on the consent agenda. As such, can I get a motion to approve the agenda with the above proposed changes?
So moved.
Whitmore is the mover and Banker is the second. Is there any discussion on any of this? Yes, Secretary.
Given the proximity of the AOD issue to the renaming issue, doesn't it make sense to move that up as well? Because a lot of the people I would assume who are interested in the one will be interested in the other. And so doing them both at the same time, and such, not making the people wait, would seem to be a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. I would happy to have a discussion on. I'm happy to move that item up as well if folks are interested. If we do feel that would be so happy to move this item up. Staff, would that be an issue for you? Okay.
No issue.
Okay. So we can have. So let's make note of that. We'll add to the changes then that will be moving up the station renaming into after our AOD discussion. So. Perfect. Thank you for the suggestion. With that being said, are there any no votes with now the updated changes? Okay, seeing none, passes 4 yes, 0 no, and 1 absent. Thank you all. Moving on to discussion items for today. The first item is the monthly government relations report, and I will give this, and this is for July of 2025. I'll now hand it over to Mr. Michael Davies, our Government Relations Officer. Could you please present for us?
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Michael Davies, Government Relations Officer. I'll start with federal items. With regards to both a reconciliation package and a rescission package, Congress did complete their work on both of those. As previously noted, none really focused or touched on transportation funding and don't have a real direct result of any impacts to RTD's federal funding that comes through USDOT. Most of the attention for Congress and federal work at this point has really moved on to the annual appropriations process. The House appropriations committees have completed their work on the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Appropriations Bill, which is the DOT funding bill. There were some significant cuts as compared to last year's appropriations bill and as compared to authorized levels in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is the current authorization bill for all USDOT programs. Specifically 8.3% below last year's appropriations bill and 13.9% below authorized levels. None of those cuts in the House focused on the formula grant programs, which is the primary funding source that RTD receives at the federal level. They were all really concentrated in discretionary grant programs. Specifically, the largest discretionary grant program is the Capital Investment Grant Program. Now, this is the competitive grant program that funds large transit projects such as East Colfax BRT. But as many of you may know, RTD received our appropriation in previous federal fiscal years. So the cuts don't impact RTD's project. It really, if the House levels were agreed to, really would impact future competitive grants within the Capital Investment Grant Program. And then over on the Senate side, the Senate Appropriations Committee actually marked up their Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development bill earlier this morning. They really stuck to authorized levels within their bill. So this is setting up a disagreement between the House and the Senate. The Senate bill, of course, is done on much more of a bipartisan basis. It does require 60 votes in the Senate to move forward with the bill, whereas a strict majority in the House can move their bill forward. So we'll keep tracking both chambers of Congress working through the appropriations bills, but that is the bill that will determine funding levels for USDOT programs that subsequently get passed down through RTD and as our federal funding. Moving over to, and actually I should touch on, I haven't seen the mark in the Senate bill yet because it hasn't been posted just yet. It should be posted later today. But over in the House side, as many of you know, we have submitted applications for earmarks. They're not called earmarks anymore, but it is essentially the same program. It is for direct funding for very specific purposes. In the past, we have received funding largely sponsored by Congresswoman Diana DeGette's office for the downtown rail reconstruction. And if you all recall, last year's appropriations bills, which never were agreed to and ultimately were approved by Congress in a continuing resolution, by approving the continuing resolution, last year's appropriation of $850,000 for the downtown rail reconstruction was stripped of the continuing resolution, and that is a standard process. If the actual appropriations bills aren't approved, generally the earmarks associated with them will not go through in a continuing resolution. So that was the case last year. The House did include that same $850,000 from last year, again sponsored by Congresswoman DeGette's office. So that is included in the House bill, and we'll of course be tracking that process through the Senate as well and keep the board up to date. Moving over to state issues, RTD staff has been in touch with the Colorado Energy Office. The Energy Office is leading the Accountability Committee 2.0 process that was a part of state legislation this year. Energy Office is working to procure essentially a facilitator and some transit consultants to help with the administration of that accountability committee. They're in the closing process of doing that now. And as all of you may know, the committee appointments need to be done by August 1st. So that news should be coming out sometime in the next week here. And of course, we'll keep the board up to date. Lastly, I will note that the Transportation Legislation Review Committee has set their schedule for the interim committee, and those dates are August 25th, September 9th, and October 21st. And RTD is statutorily required to report to the TLRC, and we'll be working with the chairs and staff from TLRC to facilitate that and schedule a time to report out to TLRC. Moving to the local level, really continuing to work on engagements and scheduling that with local jurisdictions. And I'll just note on June 20th, 2025, GM CEO Johnson, RTD Police Commander Holloway joined directors O'Keefe and Chandler with the Arapahoe County as a joint meeting of the Arapahoe County mayors, commissioners, and city managers that was held, and had an opportunity to present to them and take some questions. And those are always great opportunities to talk about RTD priorities. So with that, that concludes my report, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Keep engaged, directors. Thank you very much, Mr. Davies. Do we have any comments or questions for Mr. Davies at this time? Director Nicholson.
Mr. Davies, so you mentioned that we have the appointments to the Accountability Committee by August 1st. Two of those are going to be directors, and one of them is going to be a director, one is going to be a former director, in addition to Chair Bouquet. Are we aware of who those directors will be?
Mr. Davies.
Thanks, Director Nicholson. I have not been made aware of who those appointments would be.
Interesting. How exciting.
Thank you, Secretary. Any further comments or questions for Mr. Davies? Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Davies, for your report. Always beneficial, very helpful to know from the local all the way up to the feds level. So appreciate it. All right, moving on to our next discussion item. This is going to be our semi-annual report on director engagement. And I'm going to give it back to Mr. Kroll. Would you please present this item to the committee?
Thank you, Chair Bouquet. I'll try and keep my remarks brief on this, just frame the conversation and why it's before you. You all set out at the beginning of the year to be more engaged and present and visible within your communities. That was one of the three board-specific goals that you all came to consensus to during your board retreat on February 1st. And as a result of that ambition of the board office created a form by which directors could track their engagements. And this item was then placed on the agenda at the request of Director Nicholson, Secretary Nicholson, I should say, who wanted to engage on this topic and see how the board was doing on a regular basis. The reality here is usage of this tool has not been universally adopted yet by the board. Hopefully we will continue to get engagement with it. I know we have a lot of very active board members who just haven't been able to submit the form on a regular basis. And so the data that we provided is only the data that we have received at this point. But it does show that those board members who are submitting information are very active. We have over 110 or so events that the board members have reported on. The board office did also go back and fill in some of the blanks on events that were noticed on the 2-week calendar, but we noticed weren't included in the form results. And so you are, if you take a look at what was submitted, you're going to see what you might expect. Directors are engaging with a myriad of officials at the local, state, and federal level. You all are getting out into your communities to engage with stakeholders from nonprofits to local county commissioners, and you're engaging on a wide range of issues such as service levels, various different infrastructure projects, legislation, etc. And one thing that I would appreciate some feedback on today is just what is valuable to the board in sharing this information. Do you all want to continue to see this as something that's included as part of an executive committee meeting? Would it be more helpful instead to provide some kind of written update and issue a formal discussion at the committee level? And then generally, I just want to end with a plug for those directors who haven't yet submitted their forms to please do so. I think one great way that this tool can be leveraged by the board is for you all in leadership, especially on the executive committee, to take a 30,000-foot view of the engagements that the board is having and see where you might need to fill in the gaps and what constituencies might need a little bit more engagement, and what types of topics are you having conversations on that you should continue, and what topics are you not discussing enough with your constituencies, and use it as a strategic tool to further improve the board's engagement. And with that, Chair Bouquet, I'll conclude my remarks and happy to engage in any questions or comments on the matter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kroll. I do have some feedback, and there are some things that I'm looking for, but I'll give it over to Secretary Nicholson first.
So I say this with a little bit of tongue in cheek, but actually not really. I think we should put the list up on the board website right there alongside the maps and things like that. People want to know what we're going to, and for people like me who have been negligent in turning in our forms since February or March, it would be that much more of an incentive to get our documentation into you if we knew that the public could look at it and see whether we were doing our jobs or not. A little Power BI chart, the way that we saw in the packet of number of engagements, would probably also help show that off. So yeah, I think this is great stuff. I think we should make it as visible as possible to let people know what we're up to, where in their community we're going to. Are we spending more time on one half of the district versus another, or whatever? So yeah, make it public, as visible as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Nicholson. Yeah, I think that we can get into the nuance later on, but yeah, I think it's not the worst idea on the planet to make this public to see and show how often all 15 of us are, interacting with folks. So yeah, that'll lead to my comments later. Director Catlin.
Thank you, Chair Bouquet. I'm on the wall of shame since I haven't finished that or filled out any of those forms. That being said, I did have some time to go back through my calendar and jot down some notes in preparation of filling those out. But I was wondering, Jack, if you would be, if we filled in these things and they would be retroactive, if you would be updating those accordingly.
Yep. Sorry, I don't want to. I don't want to speak on you on behalf of you, Mr. Kroll, but retroactively, I would love to see. You know, I think if you fill in, you know, if you've had X amount of engagements, Director Catlin, I would love for those to be included in the form, because at the end of the year, when we look at this again, I think this is true documentation of how much effort has been put into, you know, this board of directors. So, I would love to see it. But sorry, Mr. Kroll, don't want to cut in with you. So
If I might, I really appreciated the format, and it was really helpful for me to see what other directors are doing. So for what it's worth, it was nice, but I will try and get on that.
perfect. Thank you, Director. Any other comments or questions about the form? Yes, Director Risha.
So thank you, Mr. Kroll, and thanks, Mr. Chair. I join Director Catlin in being on the wall of shame. I wanted to just offer some feedback on the director activities link and the reporting form. So there is a standing section in our regular board meetings of director activities. So it does feel a little bit redundant. I know sometimes we hesitate to raise our hands because that comes at the end of the meeting and it's late. Or, you know, for me personally, I feel like I'm almost grandstanding if I went through what I did in the previous month. So I just wanted to put that out there. Like, if we're going to really rely on this documentation, we might want to remove that section in our board meeting agenda. So just put that for your consideration. But on the form itself, when you click on it, it has 7 required questions. And so each section must be filled out before submission. That can get a bit rigid, especially if there's like a routine update or brief note, or you attended an event as an RT director or on behalf of the agency. So I would just ask that we take a look at those questions, maybe reduce them, and not make every section required to fill out, because some of it is not necessarily applicable. And also, or a privacy consideration. Like, sometimes the items we hear from constituents are sensitive, particularly when, you know, they relate to customer service issues or paratransit access or their personal experiences. And so I don't I would feel uncomfortable. And I would think some other directors would feel the same in kind of putting certain details on blast. I also think that when we're there's a section in the form about talking to other directors about policy. I understand this idea of transparency, but not every call or meeting is gonna result in an action. And so I feel like, you know, my interpretation of the form is that there's this expectation that, you know, we're detailing all of our communications, ones that, you know, might not be relevant here. So I also found in the form some redundancy when it asks what follow-up is needed, because in a lot of cases that follow-up is already happening, right? So we're emailing the board office, the question is raised in committee, we're having one-on-one conversations with a GMCO, or a committee chair or the board chair, or even customer service. And so I just wanted to I appreciate the intent behind the form. It does support accountability, but I just wanted to ask, I don't know if it's the executive committee or the chair, just to take these considerations, or take what I said into consideration, and seeing if we can just reduce some barriers to that form and making it more practical and flexible, because it is, as noted, another task item for us to do, and we don't have staff. I know we're all engaging in our communities, and you know, it is something on it's a to-do item. So reducing barriers, I think, would be helpful in increasing participation. And So that concludes my comments, and I hope that is not taken out of turn, because as I noted, I'm also on the wall of shame. But anyway, thank you, Mr. Chair, for hearing my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Director Rusha. Yeah, no, well, comments given for this, and I think there are a couple things that we might have to look into, going into. One, I do actually think this is a potential tool that I recommend, whoever is going to be on this executive committee, or, whoever's going to be taking the lead on this, is to continue this forward in the next year. I think that, one, making it as, easy as possible to fill out the form after the engagement. I think we can work on it a little bit. I think so far the tool has been really helpful. Going on to kind of my overall comments, I know I've talked to some of the board office staff about this. The original idea behind this form is really the documentation of the community engagement all 15 of us are doing, because all of us are doing an excellent job, I believe, of going out into our community, meeting with different stakeholders. I think it's very interesting because it, one, serves like the purpose of, should this be shown on our board website to show, hey, here's a graph of all the folks that we've been meeting with. And two, the hope is by the end of the year, we can actually look and see where the gaps are and present that and say, hey, Director Bouquet, you represent not only Douglas County, but you also have parts of Arapahoe County. And we noticed that you're doing a good job of meeting with elected officials in Douglas County. But we noticed that you could do a better job with meeting with the folks in Arapahoe County. So the hope is, and again, if you haven't filled out the form and documented stakeholder engagement, please do so, even if it was at the very beginning of this year, because that information all kind of adds together. And we start looking at it as, not the small interactions we're having, but the big picture of engagement that all of us are having, and potentially filling in the gaps going into the future. So I do hope, and I encourage us to continue to use this document not only into 25, but into future years. And I really think it's been very beneficial. Director Rusha, did you have other comments?
Yeah, just one more. I'm looking at the form right now. And then, I mean, there is an emphasis on meetings, events, and organizations. But I also understood when we first discussed this at the retreat, it included constituent engagement. And as we all know, we are a point of customer service. So I just want to, I guess I'll just ask if you could expand upon that. Is that also what you expect in this form? That's how I kind of interpreted it. So I guess for me, like if I'm working with a constituent, a customer service issue, particularly if it's complex and it's, or like say it's paratransit related, that's something that might take several emails to solve. Are those the kinds of things you also want us to report? I might have misinterpreted your instructions at the beginning of the year, and admittedly, because I get a high volume of emails, it is part of why I haven't been filling out this form, because just responding to the emails or getting to the right staff or taking the phone call is a task I'm happy to do. It's part of my job. And then to that end, I would note some of us do have a higher volume of customer service concerns because our constituents ride services more. So for example, I have higher bus ridership in my district than yours, Mr. Chair, just because of geography and need. So I guess I just want to say, just when we look at this, like holistically, that moving forward, we just consider that some directors might get more phone calls, either because of the district they represent, the communities they represent, if they're a chair of a committee, etc. So I don't think that, once we're like all kind of, I just want to just kind of put that out there because, just depending on individual director circumstances, it might look like if we were just looking at raw numbers, some directors are more engaged than others, right? But not all we do, can be put in a form or can be seen by the community. So I guess that was a question and then just a comment. So we joked about the wall of shame, but nobody really should be shamed. We all are doing the work. I think it's just about how do we show that we're doing the work. So Thank you.
Sure.
And then that concludes then I really am done on this topic. Thanks for the
No, I
second.
appreciate that, Director Risha. So I think, so working backwards, because I think there's two topics that were raised. So the first one in regards to, I know we've heard the quote of the wall of shame. The way I actually interpret this is, again, this is a collective. This is showing where we are as directors. I don't see it as a competition at all. And if we would, show this information, obviously this is public information. Anyone can watch this meeting later on YouTube. Anyone can look at our documents at any time. But if we were to, for lack of a better term, advertise this on the board website page, I more imagine it as, this is how many interactions the group of us as a 15 have had with our different stakeholders. So just to that first point of it, I've never viewed this as, a competition. For some, it might be a competition, and for some, they want to meet with, X amount of stakeholders. But overall, the hope was this is to demonstrate, one, all 15 of us are meeting with multiple elected officials throughout our districts. And two, it's to demonstrate, who we might be missing, So my first years for District G, I know I can do a lot better of a job of meeting with our chambers of commerce. I know that, there's certain stakeholders that I need to meet with. And I think it's really figuring out kind of where the gaps are. And I want to be careful not answering in real time of, what do we actually display? But for me, I never imagined this as one, a wall of shame, or imagine it as a tool to, compete with one another. It's more of a collective to show what we're all doing. Now, on the question of constituents, which you also brought up, Director Risha, when we originally just had this as a discussion at the beginning of the year, I think what I was imagining was those stakeholders that, are your chambers of commerce, that are your state legislators, that are your town council members. Those were the folks that I was kind of imagining as this as a documentation. I can see the benefit also of, what conversations you're having with individual constituents. But I would have to get back to that question and that topic as a whole, because, we do have documentation of customer concerns already. And does that fall into its own stream? So I'd have to get back to you on that one. I'm not sure if you guys wanted to offer anything in regards to individual constituents. But the way I imagined this form was really, what groups are you meeting with? What elected officials are you meeting with? Mr. Kroll, did you want to offer anything?
Sure, I'll offer two quick things. One is it relates to customer concerns and customer relationships and handling base level outreach from customers. The board's operating guidelines acknowledge a very real fact, which is that low level customer concerns are best addressed by customer care. The board office will ultimately get to the same answer as what customer care will provide that individual, but it will simply take us longer due to the fact that we are a smaller operation with many other obligations to attend to. And then to follow up on your subsequent point there, Chair Bouquet, I think, what constitutes a constituent engagement worthy of being logged in this form, I think is up to the person submitting it. I mean, if you want to use it as a tool to track those things, great. If not, it was never really intended to be that granular because of the very real reality of the volume of those individual constituent engagements that may arise during the course of the director's term.
Thank you. Director Chandler.
Thank you, Director Bouquet, Chairman Bouquet. My question is on slide number 6, Mr. Kroll, what is being measured there? It doesn't really say. Is it the questions that we have for staff or the inquiries that require staff time? How many and then how many hours? I'm a little leery as to, not leery, but questioning what's being measured. That's all.
Director Chandler, is this in regards to the director requests?
Yes, on that slide 6, page 111 of the packet.
Let's hold that question. So we're still on director engagement. So we're
I'm sorry.
So let's, no, I appreciate it.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, we'll get back. We'll definitely get back to it though. So appreciate the question though. Okay, on director engagement, Secretary Nicholson.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that I think one of the things that would really help with this process is that almost everything that I engage with is in my calendar. And so one thing that where I think staff could be extraordinarily helpful, it would be in just pulling directors' calendars for the relevant period and sending it to them, sending it to them as a spreadsheet, basically. Because then it's like, here's all of your events. Tell us which ones are direct external things, and then fill in a spreadsheet. At least for me, that's faster, significantly so, than filling in a form 35 times. And then just emailing it back to staff. That would be my preferred way. And I know that you guys have the magic wizardry to pull an Outlook calendar into an Excel spreadsheet. So I think that would be the best way to get the kind of annotated data you're looking for.
Noted. Thank you. Director Rusha.
I was gonna say perhaps you would be open, or we could consider having a monthly report instead of after every single engagement. So I don't need staff to core my calendar and give them more work. I can do that myself. But I actually think this would be easier for me if I were doing this on a monthly basis, because then I could go, like, for example, I flag certain emails and I do have things on my calendar, and then I could fill it out that way. And then maybe if we had it like in Excel format on our shared drive, that might offer just some flexibility, like in the comments and such. But I would, for those who want to fill out a form right then, or on a more frequent basis, maybe that works for them. But I would like to have an option of, like, can I just submit a report and tell me what you need to know? Like, tell me what you need in the report, and then I would submit it. But I'd rather do it once or twice a month. Really, I'd prefer once, so I can just sit down and get it done. I think it'd also just be more efficient to me, actually, in terms of time management. For your consideration.
Yeah, no, these are perfect. No, both feedback items offered by you and then Secretary Nicholson are noted, and I just got them down. I believe staff have also noted it. So awesome, guys. Well, thank you all for your discussion on this. I'm going to keep us moving. And then for our next discussion item and our final one, this is going to be the semi-annual report on director requests, and I'll give this over to Mr. Kroll again.
Thank you, Chair Bouquet. Again, Jack Kroll, Executive Manager of the Board Office, and I'll move through a few slides here very quickly to keep us on track and not elongate this meeting too much further. But again, similar to the last item, this is a semi-annual update based off of another type of activity, which is the tracked number of requests for response or advocating on behalf of a constituent for a response that the board office receives from board members and then coordinates with staff to fulfill. So just a year-by-year breakdown of the growth in this particular component of the board office's responsibilities, as well as the shared responsibility across the agency. I will say in a prior life, I served on another elected board, and the system for responding to requests at RTD is far and away more efficient, more comprehensive, and is really something that, having just gotten back from the APTA TBA-TBM seminar, I think would be the envy of many other transit agency boards across the country. And while the board office serves as a facilitator of these requests, a great deal of credit is due to GM and CEO Johnson's team and staff across the agency who really do the bulk of the work to get information back to the board in a timely and accurate and comprehensive manner. That being said, requests for information are growing. We were actually on pace to grow even faster during the last update we provided to you all in February of this year. However, the pace of requests has decreased. I think there's a few thoughts I have on that, but the main primary reason I think for that is that there has been a tremendous training and insight program put on, orientation and training program coordinated by the board office, and really the heavy lifting again from GM and CEO Johnson and her team to get new board members up to speed on a range of issues. I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you all of the civil rights training again this afternoon. That's your penultimate one. But I think because of the comprehensive nature of those trainings that are following a board prescribed path, the amount of inquiries has slackened a bit. I think there's also a tendency for the board to be very eager to get questions answered right after new members are sworn in. And over time, directors are able to acquire additional information just through the course of their service on the board. And so while we are on pace to see a decrease in the number of staff hours and the number of total requests submitted by directors relative to last year, I want to point out still that we're very much up relative to 2022 and 2023 with respect to those inquiries. One other interesting thing to note is the amount of time per request is also ticking up a little bit here. These are just the totals by director for 2024. You can see the staff hour totals in blue, and the red indicates the total number of requests. Then you can see that data again broken out by leadership team for 2024. We'll get to the 2025 data here soon, but we wanted to provide this context because you can see that the requests that directors are submitting are reaching every corner of this agency. One thing that I'm obligated to point out here is that we don't track all of the requests that come in. Some don't make it to the board office. Some are just handled expeditiously enough that they don't warrant tracking. But one category that we're not tracking due to attorney-client privilege is the amount of engagement that necessarily occurs with general counsel's office. For obvious reasons, we wouldn't want to necessarily capture the nature of that outside of a privileged environment. You can see here the total number of requests and request hours by director. So I think this was the page that you had a question about, Director Chandler. So this is just tracking total number of requests tracked by the board office and the corresponding amount of hours staff have reported back to the board office for requests from various directors. And then again, this slide here shows how those requests on the preceding slide are distributed across various departments at the agency, and departments and divisions, I should say. I think the purpose of looking at this is to remind the board of the collective impact the board can have on requests for information. And again, this process is phenomenally efficient. It is very fair. We don't prioritize requests at all based off of content. It's content neutral. But I think the board wanted to, the spirit of this being added to the board operating guidelines, I should say, is an endeavor to have the board just be aware of its collective input. One thing that I think is really great about access to information is that it's there. It upholds the principles of transparency. One thing that I'm obliged to caution the board against, though, is using that in a disciplined and focused manner. Yes, you can get as much information as one can possibly get about RTD and how it operates. I think the real question is, how are you going to use that information, and how are you going to leverage that information in pursuit of a policy objective or governance role at the agency? And and to encourage directors to use this towards those policy ends and towards your governing objectives, as opposed to simply addressing director curiosities or interests. I think it's important to stay focused, which this aligns then again with your board work plans, your committee work plans. And there was a recent change to the board operating guidelines to kind of remind board members of that, which is to say that really requests that come in, while of course all requests will be honored and pursued diligently without any interpretation as to the end goal, I think it behooves the board and board members to remain focused on your key policy objectives and to use your request for information and drain on staff and agency resources in direct pursuit of those goals. And that is why the executive committee of yesteryear asked for these reports to come forward, was a way of reminding folks, yes, you know, the information is available, you can go get it, but let's make sure we collectively as a board have a plan for what we're attempting to achieve. And with that, I will conclude my remarks and happy to engage in any questions or conversations on this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kroll, for that presentation, and thank you, staff, for getting the presentation ready. Very helpful. Director Ruscia, you are our first speaker.
Thank you. So I just want to express concern about language that's been used, not just today, but actually since I've been on the board. But specifically that directors are a drain for asking questions or raising issues that might not align perfectly with a particular staff agenda or might not be on a calendar. I don't think that language is appropriate. We are elected to serve the public and provide oversight and ensure transparency, and asking questions and seeking clarity is part of our duty. It's not a drain. If we need more board office staff, we can hire more board office staff. If there is something in the process whereby answers to questions are not being, you know, addressed efficiently, then we can look at a process. But asking or, you know, requesting that people talk less, I don't think is conducive to a productive conversation as it relates to our role. And I would just ask that when it comes to communication and time, that there's mutual respect on that. I also just wanted to flag, because I've put in, you know, requests for the board office this year, and I flagged them in my Outlook for follow-up. And I'm looking at it right now, and I have one that is 78 days old, and I've followed up 3 times. I have at least 3 that I can just see looking at the top of my box that are related to board actions, and they haven't been answered. That's not including AR requests that did not get answered in time for a vote. So I am also concerned about the timeline or time frame in which we are getting responses to some of our inquiries. So I would be, I don't know if that's something staff wants to address right now, or we can follow up later, but it is a concern of mine because the board office is supposed to be a resource. And that also includes ensuring that we have access to information that we need so that we can make informed votes or, you know, discuss or create policy as needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Ruscia, for your comments. Perfect. I've made note of them. Yes, Secretary Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair Bouquet. Yeah, I think in response to this, I would just say that, you know, I think we can all be in response, sorry, to the packet and the item. I think we can all be more disciplined in what we ask of staff, and I no doubt that applies to me as well. I will agree with Director Ruscia in the sense that sometimes you don't know what should be an agenda item, what needs to be a focus of board attention until you've asked about it. And so sometimes the first time you ask about something, or even the second time, it's before it is an agenda item, before it is on the work plan, but it's the seed and the question that turns into, oh, maybe we should get this added, maybe we should work on this, maybe we should. And balancing the difference between that and I'm just going to ask about whatever pops into my head today is hard. and obviously is a responsibility of every director, especially those of us who have things pop into their head a lot, like I do. And so I think that, you know, there definitely is a responsibility to ensure we're not wasting the agency's time, but there's also a responsibility to be asking the questions that would go unasked and to be trying to address things that might otherwise go completely unaddressed, that without asking those sorts of questions, without looking into things and picking up the rug, and so to speak, you know, you would never know, oh, hey, you know, there's a beetle infestation here. We should probably spend 3 months working on this, metaphorically speaking. So I think it's an important balance, and it's an ongoing conversation. And you have my commitment to work with staff to ensure that that is balanced in a healthy way.
Perfect. Thank you for your comments. I'm just going to offer this as my comments, and then I'll call on you, Mr. Kroll. I think at no point I believe that, you know, staff are discouraging, you know, director requests or director inquiries. I think there's a couple questions we need to ask ourselves as director and as directors when we're making our requests. And the main one, you know, I'd advocate for is, one, what is this potentially going to be leading to? You know, what is our policy discussion? What is this? Is this going to help with our work plan, or is this going to help with a potential policy? Second, is this unique to just me as a director, or have I actually built a coalition of directors? Have I asked other directors and figuring out, is this something that we should be looking into as a committee or as a full board? So building that consensus from other directors, I'd highly recommend. And then finally, the biggest one is, you know, as it's been stated, our bosses, the people who got us in this seat, is the public. We're an elected office, and big question we should be asking ourselves is in regards to, will this inquiry help my policy making decisions and help my constituency and the broad constituency of the district itself? So again, always good to be curious, always good to be going forward with inquiries that I do truly believe lead to policy, inquiries that have been built that have multiple directors interested in, and then finally inquiries that benefit our constituents. But I'm just one individual director on those comments, and I'm not a staff member. So I'll go to Mr. Kroll with any comments that he might have to offer.
Yes, I'll just quickly state Director Rusch's feedback is well taken, and one piece of information we will add to the next time we report on this. We already track this information, but it's the number of days elapsed from the time a request is logged to the time a request is closed. And that can be really helpful to show, I think, the board the quick turnaround time that is present in, I think, a vast majority of these requests. The second thing to state to Secretary Nicholson, is with respect to kind of I think it combines that collective notion that Chair Bouquet alluded to of what is the board interested in, you know, kind of picking up the rug and looking underneath on. Every year, this body approves its annual audit plan. And I think the annual audit plan is the time and place, as you all discuss that, to have very engaged conversations about what are the issues the board wants to look into collectively. Certainly management recommendations feed into a lot of that, and those should be taken very seriously. But I think there is an existing vehicle on some of these larger, bigger inquiries to use the audit function through the audit committee to make that to make those, you know, larger inquiries a reality.
Thank you, Mr. Kroll. Any further questions, comments, discussion on this? Yes, Director Risha.
Thanks. I just wanted to say, just to note, for my newer colleagues that where you can, it can be helpful to use your one-on-one time with their general manager if you're scheduling that. I know I find it really helpful, and that has decreased my inquiries to the board office, because more often than not, our general manager will be apprised, or it is going to go to a senior staff anyway. So just thought, I mean, it's your calendar. You do what you want on your agenda with that time with her, but I know that taking some of that to her, because it will eventually come to her desk, has been improved efficiency on my end. Thanks.
Good piece of advice, Director Risha. And come with a list of items, and so that you have a very thoughtful discussion
Yes.
at once. Excellent. I'm going to keep us moving. Thank you all for the discussion. Really great discussion. Thank you, Mr. Kroll, for the presentation on director requests. All right, moving on. Other matters. Are there any other matters at this time to discuss? Treasurer Banker.
Looking at the agenda, I just wanted to give you probably at least a heads up. I'm not quite sure how this is all going to turn out, but I was considering a potential amendment to the short-term performance measures, to let you know, heads up, short-term goals. And then also, well, I'll leave it at that. There's a possible amendment I might also offer on access on demand program modifications. And it's not necessarily a change that we would be voting on at this coming meeting, but it just seems to me these two programs, access on demand and Access-a-Ride, are becoming, at least in my mind, so complicated. And they're so similar that I think it would be great if it's in the next couple of months, if we could be asking the operations committee and our staff to start thinking about merging the two programs and how might we do that. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. So more information to come, but thank you.
Thank you very much, Treasurer Banker, for the heads up on that. I guess my only request would be, I guess two things is one, in regards to amendments to the reformer, making sure said amendments are relevant to the actual discussion of the short-term goals themselves compared to, potentially something that might fall out of that. And then a second one, of course, is submitting that language to our board office of potential amendments. So,
I will. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Treasurer. Mr. Kroll, yes.
Could I also recommend that to Director Banker that if you are able to connect with GM and CEO Johnson, especially, and General Counsel Snyder, especially as it relates to anything with respect to the short-term goals?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I've been meaning to do this sooner. This morning, I actually made some changes again, and so I hope to do that later today. I will. I promise, along to the chair of our performance committee. I need to reach out to Director Guzman and have a conversation with him to alert him if I decide to go forward.
Excellent. Yes, thank you, Mr. Kroll, for that reminder. But yes, all three individuals that were mentioned get their thoughts and opinions. All right, any other matters at this time for this committee? Okay, seeing none. As a reminder, the board does not hold any meetings during the month of August. So our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, September 25th at 11:15 a.m. And that meeting will be slated to review the board office budget and take an initial look at our 2026 legislative program, which will detail our legislative priorities for next year. Most importantly, we are set to hold an executive session with our board office executive manager, Jack Kroll, to discuss his performance over the last evaluation period. As such, I encourage all members of the board to attend our September meeting and to join us for that, for those very important conversations. I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Is the mover and a second from Whitmer. All right, we're adjourned as of 12:54. Everyone have a lovely Thursday.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.